Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. In today's video, we will be taking a look at the 11th Fatui Harbinger's weapon options, and also I'll be giving some in-game demonstrations between the Alley Hunter, Skyward Harp, and Windblume Ode. If you've been wondering how the two most recently released bows perform in comparison to the OG OP Skyward Harp on Tartaglia, then you're watching the right video. My Alley Hunter and Skyward Harp are both at Refinement 1, and my Windblume Ode, the free event bow, is at Refinement 5. Alley Hunter and Skyward Harp are both available in the current weapon banner. All three weapons are also at level 90. I will be demonstrating these weapons with two different builds for Childe. The first one being his one-shot Nuke build, and the second being a main DPS Hydro carry build, focusing on just his melee Hydro damage output. Let's start off with his Nuke build. Childe's been around for a while and you've probably seen many showcases of Childe one-shotting a bunch of stuff. So let's go ahead and take a look at how his Nuke build performs with these various weapons. Here are my Childe stats. Generally speaking, with Nuke builds, where you're trying to do the most damage possible, you want to stack as much crit damage, elemental mastery, and attack percent, while having just enough crit rate to be practical. Let's start with the Skyward Harp. For the first burst showcase, I will only be using Bennett's burst to apply pyro and also to boost Childe's burst damage. And we will also be doing this to my favorite volunteer, Cryo Regisvine. And now we run into the first problem with Childe's Nuke build, and that is if his nuke doesn't crit. Let's keep trying until we crit. Fortunately for me, with the Skyward Harp and 50% crit rate, Childe was able to crit the second time I tried this with the Skyward Harp, doing an impressive 244,802 damage and cleanly one-shotting our poor volunteer Cryo Regisvine. Next, let's try this with the Windblume Ode. If you recall from earlier, while my Childe has the Windblume Ode equipped, he has a 28% crit rate. Let's see if we can get lucky with this. Well, the first one didn't crit. That's pretty expected. So let's try again. And the second one didn't crit. 28% is basically 1 in 4. Surely in a couple more it will crit, right? Ugh, looks like this time Childe's E activation proc Vaporize, but at least the attack did crit. Nonetheless, this counts as a failure as well. Let's keep trying. Nope. Nah. Not gonna happen. Here we go, guys. I'm feeling it. Nope. Blech. Surely 9th time is the charm, right? Nope. I've been doing this for a while now. There's no way I can mess this up. Alright, this time I ain't messing up. Let's cast his E way over here. And it didn't crit. Has this become my life? Is this karmic retribution for my neglect of Tartaglia on my channel? Nope. Oh, for f***'s sakes. Xingqiu's dumb water swords proc Vaporize. I get it. No one likes a wet salad. Oh man, why am I doing this? This time for certain. Nope. Nope. Are crits even possible? Do crits even exist in this game? Wait, what just happened? Oh man, so I have to do this for the Alley Flash too. There's no way I'm going through that again. I don't care how much you guys hate food, I in fact love food, so this time I'm forcing this man to eat some nutritious and delicious come and get it, which gives 20% crit rate, and with Hu Tao, that gives him 32% crit rate. Now, if we compare the three, we can see that for me and for this exact setup, the Windblume Ode did the most damage, followed by the Alley Hunter, and finally followed by the Skyward Harp. Speaking of which, let's do this again, but let's actually one-shot something cool, the Primo Geovishap. And I'll be using food as well as a few additional buffs in order to actually do enough damage to one-shot the Primo Geovishap.
足元に気をつけ訓練よ。ここにいてよ。みんながそばにいてくらえ。兵士、痛いから我慢しろよ。来い。
Starting off with the Skyward Harp, Childe managed to do 817,000 damage, which is a clean one-shot. Next, with the Windblume Ode, Childe did 794,000 damage, which is still a clean one-shot. And finally, the Alley Flash did an impressive 811,000 damage, easily one-shotting the Primo Geovishap. Now we can see that due to all the various buffs happening, the Skyward Harp actually did the most damage, due to diminishing returns from too much elemental mastery, and also with a ton of attack percent buffs bolstering the Skyward Harp more than the others. And finally, with crit damage being the overall lowest multiplier after all these buffs, the Skyward Harp ended up doing more damage for my specific setup. And honestly though, the damage difference between the three isn't too important. What's more important to me is the bonus crit rate from the Skyward Harp. Anyway, all three of these weapons are clearly good for Nuke Childe being able to one-shot something like the Geo Primo Vishap. And now we can finally move on to a more sanity-preserving build, the Hydro Carry build with Childe. Let's go back to the Cryo Regisvine and reminded that it's still our favorite volunteer. We can see that all three weapons performed very well, but to no one's surprise, the Skyward Harp took it out a bit faster. This is a bit too short of a battle, as well as it being against a single target to really make any conclusions. So let's try this out in Abyss 12-3. I know this isn't necessarily a meta team for Childe, but I've set this team up to focus entirely on the Hydro damage output for Childe. Childe is using the 4-piece Heart of Depths, and I also use these same artifacts on him across all three weapons. Realistically speaking though, you'd want more crit rate on the Alley Hunter or the Windblume Ode, so I'm going to compensate for that by using Rosaria to also keep the enemy frozen and also provide crit rate to Childe, and also having Chongyun on the team to provide Cryo Resonance for another 15% crit rate. And finally, Bennett will be here to initiate a fight with a small Hydro nuke, so that way perhaps the slightly larger numbers from Windblume Ode may help a bit. I know this team isn't optimal, but I wanted to just focus on Childe's raw Hydro damage output with a small nuke at the beginning to demonstrate these weapons. Unsurprisingly, the Skyward Harp still did the best, with the Alley Hunter in second and the Windblume Ode in third. However, what surprised me the most was actually the Alley Hunter's performance, and if we actually do some math, we'll see why. My calculations are, as always, with average damage maximized numbers. In other words, this is how much damage you'd be doing with nearly perfect artifact stats and substats. Realistically speaking, you can reach between 60 to 90% of these numbers if you farm a ton of artifacts. So with the Alley Hunter, right when Childe hops onto the field, and for the next 4 seconds, Childe has plus 20% bonus damage. Then over the next 5 seconds, after the first 4 seconds, Childe gradually loses his 20% bonus damage. However, what's interesting to note is that even at its weakest, the Alley Hunter is still a bit stronger than the Windblume Ode at its strongest, at least for raw Hydro damage. Also, given how often you keep Childe off the field, the Alley Hunter is quite a usable weapon on Childe due to his forced downtime when you're done with his melee stance. And one other thing to note about the Alley Hunter on Childe is that I recommend putting Childe not on team slot 1. That way Childe will be off the field at the beginning of an Abyss floor in order to stack the buff from the Alley Hunter. Otherwise, Childe will be on the field at the very beginning and he will not have the Alley Hunter's buff up for long, if at all. Now, of course, it goes without saying that if you have the Skyward Harp, you should use it on Childe, since it provides both crit rate and crit damage. The Skyward Harp helps tremendously in bringing your stats closer to their maximum damage potential. As for the Windblume Ode, as you can see, it's still very usable and easily clear 12-3, but it is by far the worst weapon out of the 3 for Childe's melee damage. After 6 seconds with the Windblume, once his attack buff runs out, it actually does less than the Sacrificial Bow, so that's worth keeping in mind. It does very low damage once his attack buff is out. As for other weapons, the Rust is a great choice if you spam his normal attacks and not his charged attacks. The Black Cliff and the Viridescent Hunt are great as well. And finally, even the Prototype Crescent and the Amos Bow are usable. So there you go. I believe all 3 of these weapons are very usable on Childe, with the Skyward Harp being unsurprisingly the best, but with the Alley Hunter surprisingly being quite good. And due to the way Childe works, you will often have the Alley Hunter's buff up for a significant portion of the fight. And of course, the Windblume Ode, while not being great, is a perfectly usable weapon. Let me know what you guys think about these weapons on Childe, and also let me know what you guys think about Childe and whether my personal opinion of not liking to use him because in order to one-shot a lot of things, you need to have very low amounts of crit rate, and personally, I don't really enjoy that type of playstyle. But as always, thanks for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Win to Lose, signing out.